Colleagues, is any of you missing these yellow documents? I have too many yellow documents. I can donate some. Huh?
First of all, appreciate the wisdom and guidance of the committee to allow us some time to prepare. Indeed, you realize from our submissions that everything that was asked yesterday, we have the answers. Just to give an overview on why Uganda Revenue Authority finds itself acquiring land, we are constantly opening border posts that facilitate trade. And also to improve the services in these border posts, government came up with a plan to build one-stop border points. So these essentially bring all the government entities that are involved in facilitating trade across our borders, and they house them in one office. So many times you find that the pioneering agency that acquired a plot of land at that particular post has some land, but it's not sufficient for all of us to work together as government. In some cases, it is immigrations. They have a small piece of land at a border point. But when it is gazetted as one stop border point, then that land must be expanded to accommodate all the MDAs that are needed to work together to facilitate business across borders. So that has put us in a position where we find that either we have a small piece of land where we started with this border point, but as operations begin, we lack spaces for parking of vehicles, we lack spaces for accommodating staff, we lack spaces for enough office space. And there was a project that government consulted using an external consultant to find out how much space we have in each of these border points. And where the space was not sufficient, recommendations were made to expand those areas. So that is just the background of how we find ourselves in need for additional space. And Honorable Chair and members, because of this need, Parliament has been approving in our budget a budget vote for land and building. This helps us to build offices for the members of Parliament who may have traveled in Masaka. We are at the moment building a regional office there. And if you read our plans for this financial year, we'll be building other regional offices in Gulu and Mbale. So that vote is called land and building. It's the vote that we use to acquire land. So there is no diversion and there is no paralyzation of other activities or any mischarges. These properties and lands that we have acquired are from the budget item of land and building. Honorable Chair and members, there was a concern about direct procurement. And indeed, because of that background that I've just given, many times we do not have several options of land that we are considering. It is that you have a border post here, and between this border post and maybe no man's land, there is a small property there owned by a private individual. So it is that property that you want to buy to expand your area, but also to control the border operations. Because if you let a private individual have this piece of land between you and no man's land, then how will you control smuggling and declarations of people and goods crossing the border? So, Chairman, that kind of leaves us with limited options of which piece of land to buy. However, following the direct procurement path, we take care of all the interests of government. For example, to ensure that government signs up to fair terms. And those are the documents that are in this file that will be explained shortly by my team. So despite the fact that some of the procurements have been direct, All other measures, like ensuring that we have the best value, have been taken care of. Consulting the chief government valuer in all cases of procurement, it has been done. Consulting the Attorney General where the amounts are above the threshold of 200 million, and also making sure that the land we acquire is properly used. Therefore, there is no wastage. All these, Honorable Chair and members, I would like to assure you that they have been done, and the document that we've just shared has a summary and a detail of that. So with those remarks, Honorable Chair and members, allow me to invite the Commissioner of Corporate Services as the line commissioner to carry us through that summary in that file in brief, so that we answer the specific questions that came through yesterday. Thank you.
Thank you, CG. Thank you, Honorable Chair and the Honorable members, for again this opportunity to come before you and elaborate further on the issue of land acquisition. We made a brief summary to respond or to speak to the issues that were raised by Honorable Elijah, if I may speak specifically to that, summarizing the respective pieces of land that we acquired. In the document that has been shared with you, Honorable members, it talks about the respective locations of these pieces of land, which is Busunga, Bundibujo District, Mirama Hills, in Tungamo District, and Bunagana stroke Kisoro, respectively. To speak specifically to the sizes, in terms of acres, for Busunga it is 0.716. For Mirama Hills it is 0.3750, and for Bunagana or Kisoro it is 0.182 acres. Hectares, sorry. We went ahead, Honorable Chair, to summarize it in acres. Again, for Busunga, it is 1.769 acres. For Mirama Hills, it is 0.929, and for Bunagana Kisoro is 0.45 acres. Honorable Chair.
Yes, carry on.
Thank you, Honorable Chair, once again. We went ahead to give a breakdown of the titles and the nature of titles or tenure. And for Busunga, Honorable Chair, if you allow me, I'll go one by one. Busunga, the tenure is freehold registration volume, which is 1574. It is a freehold registered in the names of Mr. Mudisha Julius. The folio number, Honorable Chair and members, is 17. The block number, Honorable Chair, is 666. The plot number is 49. The village is Meringi Tanwa 2. The county is Wamba County, Bundibujo District. I already alluded to the acreage, Honorable Chair, so I'll skip that with your permission. And the size of acreage, I also already alluded to that, Honorable Chair, but I may repeat it. It is 1.769 acres, and we have attached the Chief Government Valuer's report to clarify that, Honorable Chair and members. Honorable Chair, the Chief Government Valuer's price for this land that was valued is 350 million exclusive of taxes. The actual price that was paid subsequently is 265,957,4 446.8 inclusive of taxes, to be specific, withholding tax. That represents a saving of 100 million between what the chief government value had recommended and what we actually paid for this land, Honorable Chair and members. The type of ownership, a copy of certificate or certificate of title is attached as A2, Honorable Chair and members. And the method of acquisition.
There is a genesis. Because I was reading through documents, this person said, I have land available to sell. Chief government valuer gives the value, and then you disagreed and that kind of thing. You know, but before you went to court, how did you get to determine, want to purchase this land? Because the court issue was about disagreeing on the amounts. Because I read through a couple of documents. So you needed to give us that background. So the method of acquisition cannot, in my view, be an out-of-court settlement, because the out-of-court settlement had a genesis somewhere, which we need to know.
Chair.
Honorable Abdallah?
I want to conclude, Chair.
Chair, exactly, I was on that.
Which border post or whatever, any of your installations that we shall want to visit, ours will be noticed to you that we are coming here, just be there. So we shall facilitate ourselves to come. I thought I needed to clarify that, because people might think too many things. A tenth of this 1 million plus with more money. So in other words, I'm trying to understand how you can properly account for the 7.46 billion in 2020-2021, because it's a lot of money, and yet you recruited just 167,000 taxpayers, while the following year you used less money, 6.41 billion, and you recruited over 1 million taxpayers. Why? Why is there such a disparity? One would think that with 7.46, maybe the figure could be higher. And we can say the same for a couple of other years. So let's get an explanation to that.
Honorable Chair and honorable members. Chair, the quick explanation to this was really the impact of COVID-19. The year when we recruited 167, yes, we had the staff on board and we were spending on them, but we had very limited mobility and very limited tax registration activities. But also, coincidentally, the following year, when we enlisted new taxpayers in excess of 1 million, we were just getting into the easing of the lockdowns, but we also maximized third-party data that we are using. So we are using data analysis to identify those taxpayers, potential taxpayers who are involved in some activity, say those with trading licenses, those with meters for power and water in excess more than one, as potential taxpayers with rental incomes and so on. So you will notice that it's not just the financial year 2021-22, but going forward, our register expansion has improved significantly, both through TRIP and other registration programs that we have because of the use of technology. But those two combinations, third-party data and easing in the lockdown, account for the significant numbers in registration, Honorable Chair. But I also have the Commissioner directly responsible for this program for any additional comments, sir.
Thank you, Chair, Honorable Chair, and Honorable Members. I think the Commissioner General has pointed out the question that was asked by the Honorable Chair. But in addition to that, I want to comment on the recommendation by the Auditor General's team, and I want to thank them for at least recognizing that we achieved our target. It is rare that the auditors give thanks, and I want to thank them for that. The recommendation was that the targets seem to have been lower, and that's why we achieved them. We took care of that recommendation, and that's why in the subsequent years, we increased the target to 1 million. And when they come back in 2022, 2023, they will realize that our target was again increased to take care of the recommendation they made. We have, I don't know, Chair, whether I can go to the other issues. There were around 3 of them.
Yes, sure.
Target for 2022, 2023. After that year, the next year, what was your next target after that 1.1 million of that year?
Our target was, I think it was 1 million again.
After realizing that you can hit 1 million, you again set 1 million. Are you setting lower targets, or you're underestimating your potential to work harder?
I think these are targets that were locked in by the ministerial policy statement, and we follow those.
Chair,
you're now taking me to the ministerial policy statement, my dear. I say, aren't you setting lower targets for yourselves? You set 1 million. You got 1 million. You again set yourself at 1 million. Yet you have data like he has, like the ED has said, CG has said. You had the data, you had third party, you had what?
And we realize that now you are going.
I think that's why you're saying that you're over.
Just said it some minutes
you are achieving more than 100% because you're putting lower targets.
I think the general point is, so yes, the COVID year, as you're saying, you recruited fewer taxpayers. Maybe understandable. Following year, over 1 million, the concern is you should be working harder to recruit more taxpayers. Because you see, the challenge we have in our country is there's a few people that shoulder the tax burden, especially those in formal employment. Those are easy to go after. Their salaries and so on. But you people don't seem to be casting your net wide enough to bring everybody within, you know, do you want to call them tax brackets or whatever the case might be? Yeah, those that should be paying taxes. That's the concern. The people should be working a lot harder because you are working alongside these several entities, and we'll be asking a bit about that. But first, respond to that. Yes.
I have a question, because the way I understood your question was that you were able to recruit more people, or maybe less people with the same amount. But then the following year, you spent the same amount but recruited less. Is that what I got from you?
Actually, they spent less money the following year and recruited much more.
Much more.
Because 2020, 2021...
And what about the expenditure? I was looking at the expenditure part of it.
The expenditure was 7.46 billion.
Yes.
For 2020, 2021. And they recruited 167,000 taxpayers.
And the following year, the expenditure was what?
The following year, expenditure was 6.41 billion. And they recruited over 1 million, 1.1 million taxpayers. His reasoning is, yes, COVID, and yet you still had to meet bills. I don't know what more, because if things were not operating as should, what exactly is the 7.46 billion do?
To the contrary, you had to spend more.
In addition,
Very much, Honorable Chair and Honorable Members. We really appreciate the comments on expanding the tax register. And Honorable Chair, this is our focus and priority. Just as an indication, in just before COVID, the year 2019-2020, our tax register was at 1.7 million taxpayers. As at the end of the current financial year, our tax register is at 3.3 million taxpayers. So there is significant growth of almost double. However, Honorable Chair and members, as we onboard new taxpayers, especially those that we get from third-party information, there is need to onboard these taxpayers, to handhold them, to sensitize them, and to make them accept the fact that it is the responsibility of every citizen to contribute towards the national development. So all of them do not add value instantly, and all of them also take time to accept the new obligation that they have not been used to. So, honorable members, you'll be hearing a lot of outcry there in the public. We are being overtaxed, we are being, and so on and so forth. But this is the effort. So we are combining, it's like a balancing act. And that speaks about the issue of targets. Yes, we did a lot of data analysis during the lockdown as URA. We are not approaching, but we are using data to know who is doing which activity. And therefore, in the following year, we register the number. And then we go through the cleaning process. Because the one you register, you record him, he says, no, I don't know that tin. I don't know the activity you're talking about. I don't know this supply. So in a way to try and clean and onboard the people you have registered, sometimes we lower these numbers of targets to the TREP team and other registration groups, so that the ones we register, we bring them to maturity, we bring them to the purpose of registration, which is beginning to pay tax. So the numbers are good, and we would want to drive them. We have a medium term program to at least have 5 million taxpayers by the year 2025. But we are also mindful of the quality and the contribution that will come from the newly registered taxpayers. So that's how the numbers vary, Honorable Chair and members.
How do you set these targets? Because the general concern is that everybody is not paying their fair share. You'll find the small income earners, the small business people, those that you're able to go after, they are paying. But as we shall be discussing along the way, there are people who are not paying what they should for different reasons, and we'll be getting to those. So now you're giving us a target. How do you set this target to determine, maybe realistically or otherwise, for this year, we're going to go after this number of people, how, and so on?
Thank you, Honorable Chair, and I'll ask the Commissioner for IT and one for domestic taxes to give more detailed comments. But just to mention that the kind of data that we analyze gives us indications on who is paying what tax. I'll give an example of KCCA data, or any other local government for that matter. When we received from them how many people have been licensed, then that's an indication that those people who have trading licenses are doing some businesses. So we get into verification, the level of business, and what taxes we can register them for. When we get IFMIS data, it gives us who is supplying government. Then we go back and check, are they registered for taxes? And then we reach out. So we use different data sets. When we receive national water data, it tells us how many meters. And then we match these meters against an individual tin. If someone has 3-4 meters, it most likely means that he has more than one house. But sometimes when you go into the verification, you actually find that these meters are in the same house, 3 different meters to different buildings within. So there is a bit of verification, but there is a bit of indicative data. So we use indicative data to tell us how many more we can bring on board. And we use this to give targets to the teams responsible for those areas. And then when they verify and register, we adjust those numbers accordingly. But Honorable Chair, it's teamwork. I would like my colleagues to add any more comments on how we come up with these numbers.
Excuse me,
Okay.
Chair.
Yes, Honorable Linda.
Yeah, Chair, before the Commission clarification on this, on the issue of high taxes, some people have been overtaxed, and sometimes they write no objection letters to URA to review. But it has happened that sometimes you take long, like months, without replying them, and these people are there, they are being charged interest every month, and yet URA doesn't give them feedback. Then also on the issue of some of the entities that you work with, like Ministry of Local Government, where I've seen that for the past 4 years, you have been overrating the taxes to collect, whereby you target 60 billion, at the end of the day you collect 18, but you continue targeting the same amount of money which you don't collect. So I would like to seek clarification from you. Why do you continue targeting high targets which you are not collecting? Thank you.
In particular, I will be very specific. We have supermarkets, and in the business of supermarkets, many of them, by the way, are closing out business. The reason is there is tax discrimination. Some other supermarkets are paying exactly what is supposed to be. Others are favored. And that has killed so many supermarkets. If you look at ShopRite, Tuskys, so many of them have closed out business because of the unfair system that is happening. Secondly, Mr. Chairman, if you look at this table 9, you'll see that they have performance targets. And of course, those performance targets have a budget. But if someone performs below even 50%, what happens to the budget that you gave him? Does he still take that action money? Because I'm looking at now, if you look at URSB, that is 2019-2020, the budget performance was 17.7%. And they had a budget for that activity based on the target performance. Did they return some money? Oh, that is money to enjoy at the end of the day. Thank you.
Yes, Honorable Abdallah.
Thank you, Chair. To supplement on the issue raised by my colleague, we have seen businesses which have benefited from waiver of taxes, like game, for a specified period of time. And immediately when the waiver is expiring or when it has expired, these businesses close and go. They have benefited from us, and the government has not benefited from them. Through you, Honorable Chair, I'm requesting URA to avail us a list of all businesses which are benefiting from the waiver, including those who have benefited and closed, to pave a way for us to advise Parliament in our report. Thank you.
Yeah, and perhaps this begs the question, but because we want to be sure everyone is paying their fair share. Many times you hear, especially as I said earlier, people in the formal sector, they are the ones shouldering the bulk of the burden because for them it is easier. By the time the person gets their salary, 30% is off and that kind of thing. Yeah. How do you determine who gets a waiver? How do we make that determination on your end? Just a second. How do you make that determination? Because you see, it could explain why we are recruiting maybe fewer taxpayers than we should. How do we determine who gets a tax waiver and who does not, who qualifies and so on? There are those, of course, that might come through Parliament. There are those on your end. It's important we get enlightenment on that. Yes, Honorable Cooper.
It's a question I put to you, wanting to clarify from you. If you look at the table, Table 8 and Table 9, I still insist that we need that clarity. The actual for 2020-2021 for URA was 91,534 registered. And
that's Table what?
You are using Table 8 and Table 9. Table 8 talks about expenditure. Table 9 is about the registered, the actual, the target and the actuals. So I am just looking at URA. On the, look at the Auditor General's report. I guess you have the Auditor General's report. On page 15 and 16.
Sorry, Chair, from our document, it's Table 9 and 10. Just want to be sure the numbers are still.
You see, this connects to the question you are raising, which is not fully answered. you see in 2020-2021, the target, first of all, the budget was 7.46 billion. Now, what was the actual output? It was 91,534 taxpayers registered. The following year is the same budget, but the output, the actual of the registered, is 836,252. But also in that very year, out of that budget, the funding which was available, 7.46 billion, they spent 641, about 6.4. Looking at the figures, because you have spent all the money the previous year and you got 91. But here we are spending less, but achieving 830. It's almost eightfold. Eightfold. So, because if it was before COVID, the other previous year, you wouldn't have spent all that money. But now here is, because that's why you can't even achieve much, because there was COVID. But now here is a situation where you have spent money, because you can't move. If there was COVID, you can't move. So how would the expenditure happen? If there was COVID, there was no limited movement. It would have been less expenditure, but also less output. But now the following year, we're saying you are spending less, but having an eightfold registration of taxpayers. That was one question on those two tables.
So in other words, what did the 7.6 billion do, for example? Because if you're saying there's COVID, that's why you could not recruit as many taxpayers, but the money was spent, 7.6 billion. And yet the following year, 6.41 billion. And for me, I was actually getting the total of all the taxpayers they recruited, not just those under URA, because URA coordinates all these other entities. That's why I was talking about 1.16 million. Yeah, so what, because you said, yeah, you had to pay staff and that kind of thing. Are you saying the 7.6 billion during that year when you recruited few people was all on salaries, or what exactly? What did it do?
Maybe, Chair, now that you have said that, look, which we had last time. Now, the issue of this money. You remember, we had an argument and say, who receives this money under TREP? Does URA receive it and disburse to the others, or the other entities receive also? Maybe you need to know the shares. Maybe that can also explain this year. Maybe because of the sharing, that's why it was maybe the other was spent. That's why it came in. So we want to know how this money is managed, because it's a project, that TREP project.
Okay, from the documents, I'm coming on Mzali. From the documents that I read, this is a vote to URA. URA disburses to these entities. What we need to know, though, is how do you determine KCCA gets this, Ministry of Local Government gets this, URSB, and that kind of thing. But also, because now the accountability we demand is from you, how do you get these accountabilities from the various entities that you're giving this money to? Because ultimately, it is you disbursing it. It is you as URA that is supposed to account for this money. You're giving it to KCCA to help them in recruiting taxpayers. Local government, you're doing the same. URSB and so on. How do you determine who will give this amount to each of the entities, and how do they account? That's important. Honorable Mzali, you had a point of procedure.
On TREP, and I'll ask the AC Finance to give us more details on what we spend on each budget activity. But overall, we have a program charter which guides us on what each entity is supposed to do, the activities they will be covering, and how much of the TREP budget they will take. And indeed, Honorable Chair, as we have mentioned, URA gives this money to the entities, they disperse, they make accountabilities, which form part of our accountabilities that we submit at the end of the financial year. But I will ask AC Finance to give us more details on the different activities that we handle under TRIP and how much they take.
Thank you very much, Chair. This is a rejoinder to the submission by the Commissioner General. So this TRIP program has the entities that have been listed, and there is a program charter under which it is determined on an annual basis how much will be utilized by each of the entities. So the steering committee of TRIP determines those amounts on an annual basis, and we spend according to that. So some of them, as CG has already mentioned, involve disbursements to the entities, where, for instance, that entity could be procuring cars, they could be procuring computers, tools of trade. Then there's also the standard salaries that are paid across all the different entities for the staff that are recruited. So within each of these entities, we have TRIP staff, and their wages are also allocated to that vote. I will request that we are allowed to give the specifics of what was spent against each of the entities. It's not available right now, but we can make that available to account for what each of the entities used for their specific activities. But the charter is what determines what goes to each of the entities. Thank you, Chair.
Honorable Chair, can
Just
I
on
proceed
that
to
one,
the
Chair.
next? Honorable Chair.
They refund when you don't meet the targets, or it's just left at that?
Okay, Honorable Chair and Honorable Member, thank you for that question. Now, there are two targets here. First of all, the monies we give are for specific activities, as already mentioned by AC. And when these entities do not meet their targets, we have that steering committee which reviews the performances, and we sit and agree on the areas of improvement. But the monies that were earmarked for those activities are definitely spent even when they have not met their numbers and targets. It's only the unspent monies that are returned at the end of the year, financial accountabilities, which are returned and they are taken back to the consolidated. But let me ask the Commissioner IT to make some additional comments.
Thank you, CJ. Honorable Chair, the activity of expanding the register requires that we work with these parties listed. And part of the work that we've been doing is to build capacity for this kind of synergy to work.
Chair,
If you could
Chair,
pull your microphone closer.
Let him be informed that you are informing us, not the chair alone.
Even the chair was about to say that he speaks louder. Just pull the microphone closer if you can, and then amplify.
Thank you, Honorable
You know, these IT people, they're always dealing with machines and what, and so they don't talk to the machines. Maybe that's a challenge, but please proceed, Commissioner.
I hope I'm very clear. Thank you, Honorable Member. Saying that we require to work with these different entities for us to build a footprint for registration and tax payment. And in the first years, we've been building capacity. And a lot of this money has been going to IT tools to equip the teams to be able to do the work. And if we take an example of, let's say, URSB, the dream is that if you are to register your business so that to transform from the informality of business, you should also be able to register for your taxes at the same transaction point, and then be able to be educated and onboarded into the tax system. It is the same for the local governments. And one of the projects we worked on is the integrated revenue administration systems with the local government. If you look at, I was just looking at the document here that I can refer us to very quickly, the budget execution circular for this year. In there are details of what IRAS, this integrated system, has done. And it's reflecting that we're actually beginning to see revenue growth coming in from the revenue, the local governments growing because of the activities that come from building this capacity. So my point, Honorable Chair, is that the first years have been about building capacity, but we begin to reap the rewards of that in terms of expanding revenue collection and as well as registration on the tax base.
Yes, Honorable Jessica.
Thank you. I want to pick from what he has just said, that the returns from our district local governments are growing. Indeed, that's true. But the businesses are collapsing. Chair, many shops have closed. I want to know whether they do assessment to give a feedback to government. As Parliament, we appropriate and we approve all these taxes. But we need a reliable feedback from the implementers, because I live in Adjumani and many shops have closed. Some people have failed to pay their loans because as you are paying the loans, you're also paying many taxes. So what is your role in giving feedback to us so that as we sit in Parliament, we take care of these things that we approve? Thank you.
Yes, CG. And as you respond to that, we still need the expenditure in the COVID year, the 7.46 billion. What did that money do?
Thank you, Honorable Chair. I think on that one, Honorable Chair, the AC Finance made a request to allow us time to prepare and see what we spent on. She didn't have the numbers of CAF, but we can provide this for sure at the earliest. Maybe tomorrow. I was going to say today, but we may not have it delivered before.
Okay, let's have it tomorrow morning.
Okay, sir. So, Honorable Chair, if I can quickly go to the other questions.
Chair, I'm sorry, just supplement. Does withholding tax really go back to the taxpayers? And do we have evidence to that? Thank you.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you, Honorable Chair and Honorable Member. Let me start with the withholding tax question as a follow-up. Now, Honorable Esther, the questions that you are raising are Jessica, my apologies. Honorable Jessica, my apologies. The questions that you are raising are valid. We will take interest in reporting on the effect of taxation on businesses. But maybe if I can just give a general comment, honorable members, that the taxes we take from the small businesses, especially in those towns, up country, the main tax we collect from them is a tax called presumptive tax. It was passed here by Parliament. It is a form of income tax, but it can be paid by small businesses who may not even have record of what they have done. And it is also paid in tranches. So the lowest tranche is 80,000 income tax for that whole financial year. 80,000. So I don't think there is a business that can close because of 80,000. And this is any business that has a turnover in the whole financial year of domestic taxes. Can you remind me?
I hear members murmuring. I think they wanted to put the CG.
That the lowest tax is 80,000, the next is 200,000, the next is 400, and I think the highest is 800,000. So this is presumptive tax. But we will, following the comment raised by the honorable member, take interest in knowing those who have closed, what the reason could be. But we're also working with the local governments to try and harmonize taxation so that we approach these entities as one government. Because it's true that the local governments also collect those trading license fees. There are also other taxes. So we are having an engagement where we are saying, as one government, can we collect one tax from these businesses? And then we have a technology that helps us share each one that is supposed to go to local governments and to the central government. That is discussion underway, and with the help of automation, we'll get to that level. But Honorable Chair and members, if I can quickly talk about the next question, which was on waivers, and I'll ask the Commissioner Legal to explain the nature of waivers, because Honorable Chair, as you indicated, there are those waivers that are already in the law passed by Parliament. And our role there is just to sensitize the taxpayers of the tax benefits that they can take advantage of as long as they meet certain requirements. But there are those waivers that taxpayers, when they're having hardships, apply for, and still the final approval is with Parliament. But I will ask the Commissioner Legal to explain a little more on the laws that apply and the processes involved in these tax waivers. I just wanted to set a clear record that there is no time when Uganda Revenue Authority has given a waiver on its own. So there are no waivers on our side. It is whatever starts there must come to the Ministry of Finance, and Ministry of Finance must bring it to Parliament for final approval.
Thanks very much, Chairperson. Let me start with the 80,000, the small money we are talking about. CG, I want to tell you, you are existing because of small businesses, not big businesses. Those who are avoiding taxes are the big ones. Now, the chapati maker, 80,000 is a lot. That is capital. And if they are about 1 million in Kampala, and you said the 80 cannot close, then we need to go down and assess. Secondly, why she was insisting on saying, do you go down to assess the situation? Since COVID, let me give you an example of rental houses. Majority of the people could not afford. They left the houses. KCC is demanding ground rent, you are demanding your monies. Without even stating, knowing what is happening in the place, apart from the IT man sitting on his computers and sending messages, taxes, 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 as if COVID, you are not aware that it took place. This the ground is she was talking about. Go down and see what is happening and why people are closing. Instead of getting interested in only getting taxes. Yes, we want taxes, but you should also go down and see what is taking place since COVID. Yeah.
Additionally, so, in other words, if URA can give us an excuse that as a result of COVID, they didn't hit certain targets of recruiting taxpayers, yet they spent money, they should also allow that as a reason from their clients. Do you call them clients? Yeah, they are your clients, really, because they give you money, which eventually,
Mr. Chairman,
so it should be a two-way.
Mr. In regard to what Honorable, my neighbor here has just raised, may I know, is there a provision for a review? Because we all know that during COVID, many businesses got affected. One to do schools. Many schools closed. Now that COVID is over, they have resumed. But when you go to regional offices, the IT man or IT people, they are ever sending messages. Shouldn't you happen to file this? It will be closed. I've interacted with many school operators. They are really in tears. Is there any provision whereby you can send your people to Gandhi physically assess what happened to such businesses? Because we represent their interests here. And I'm happy that I'm interfacing with the CJ. I raised this issue before you at Chankwazi. Sorry, Honorable Ssenyonyi was not there when I mentioned Chankwazi.
No, you represented me. I didn't have to be there.
He was sick. He did not, on Zoom, over review, over look into such businesses.
Chair, now that he was explained to in Chankwanzi, is in order to ask for a re-explanation. What didn't he understand then? Why did he go to Chankwanzi?
Oh, okay, it's possible that either in Chankwanzi, for whatever reason, here in Cosase, he's going to get a satisfactory answer, and I will ensure of that. So, no problem. You can ask that question, and we will get an answer here. We shall not let them go. Yes, Honorable.
Chair, you know, URA collects for universities the school fees, including ID money. So I want to know whether you take that school fees as part of your correction, and if it is also part of your budget, and yet this money is supposed to go back to universities. Because I've seen the Minister of Finance saying you have hit your target, you have overcorrected. So I want to know if that school fees is also part of your correction.
Actually, it's not true that they hit that. They didn't hit their targets. by over 700 billion, 740 billion. I was looking at the documents. So it was worse during COVID, but even last year, they didn't hit the target. So I don't know where you're getting that finance is saying that they are overperforming. But we'll get to that. Yes, Honorable Chair.
Because they will think you're talking about yourself. Colleagues, I have heard ourselves talk about challenges to do with the domestic revenue mobilization as a strategy. We should know that on one side of supply, the resource envelope, we need to address it without necessarily injuring our people, but also come to terms with the fact that we need to collect revenue in order to meet the demands of our budget. Honorable Chair and colleagues, for example, talking about that presumptive tax that they give to some of our constituents, I'll give an example of myself. There is a trading center, it's a town council. Some of the traders who have shops of garments were given a presumptive tax of about 80,000, like the Commissioner General is saying. And he was saying, like, this is, am I supposed to pay this? So I realized one thing is we need sensitization of our taxpayers, which is very critical. And two, before I go to number two, sensitization, why? Because our people, unless they understand preliminary bookkeeping, they will not appreciate what you're telling them. So and filing returns and all this, and the tax identification numbers they've opened, some of them were opened even irregularly, they closed them, they don't have business, meaning that point number two, we need to clean our register. To clean our register, some of them maybe they have registered in doing business, yet they were only transferring a motor vehicle into their names, so that we're able to understand what business are they in. And thirdly, Honorable Chair and colleagues, unless we grow our taxpayer base, tax base widening, we are not going to get revenue. And growing that means even if someone pays 20,000 in a year, but finally it adds to the resource envelope. So it is important that the Uganda Revenue Authority deliberately goes out to clean their register, that's one. Two, goes out to sensitize our people and appreciate the need for taxes. That's what I thought I should share. Thank you.
Okay. Documents first before you submit.
Yes. Thank you, Chair. Chair, I will go spot on and speak like a villager to URA. As we discuss tax registration and this expansion program, I'm more interested in their partner called the Ministry of Local Government. And this is where the tragedy is. In the interest of realizing this expansion program for registration, URA, according to reports from communities, deployed just IT experts, not actually tax experts, but basically IT people and a few computers in villages. They registered randomly. It became a requirement in local governments now that to do even a chapati business, a license you have to register with URA. This is what is happening in communities. And now, this random registration would pick a chapati, and they will presume that your income is 50 million this year. So they create a presumption, and they register it against that particular taxpayer. The interest of this chapati seller is to secure a license because the local government is closing his or her business. And their interest in registration has been purely to register these operational taxes, licenses. The tragedy we have is that URA has entered wrong information in terms of account records for small scale business owners, including chapati vendors, among others. And that wrong information is being used. Because now when we hear that the program was extended, well, that is one way. But in terms of the repercussions on community, that you have wrong information, wrong data captured against individual taxpayers, some of which
you just assertively describe the figures that this is their income per period of accounting year. And this is why the problem is that people are being taxed and being demanded of taxes which they don't actually qualify for. What efforts are being done to review this data captured from communities? Because here you may disguise that yes, the program extended, but it's extended. First of all, there's a lot of legal information captured. You disguise under the law that once this information is captured, URA just tabulates every time there's a quotation sent on someone's email. Probably, but as well in communities, most of these emails most of these village owners don't own emails. Some use neighbors' emails. Now, they just find URA closing them without even knowing that they have a tax obligation. But more importantly is that the presumptive income registered against some of these taxpayers, the low-income earners, is not true. What are the efforts to review such? Minus saying that you have expanded the program, but there is also wrongly captured data in terms of the presumptive tax payable, among others. What are the efforts being done to review such a process, and what should the community do? Those who have a lot of higher taxes, where should they run to? Because there is nowhere to run to. I heard someone talking about waivers. Those are for the rich. Where should the poor come to also register their complaint and attend to their complaints that this is not a tax applicable to me, it's a high tax? Where should I run to? Minus us discussing the expansion. But we also need to look at the irregularities in the registration and capturing of this data.
Okay. So, from colleagues, one, as we were saying, the need to widen so that everybody pays their fair share. And you'll be talking to us about who qualifies for a waiver, who are those, big untouchable people, and yet the small ones, chapati makers and so on, you go and close them down and the little shops. Two, true record being captured, as the Honorable is mentioning, that your assessments seem to be problematic. Maybe we need to know how that gets to happen. Because as you're recruiting these people, some of them are crying and saying, I don't make as much as URA is demanding of me. Three, harmonization of the different entities for a uniform tax. You mentioned that, CG. Because you see, you'll find this person, KCCA, will be at their door today for tax. They sort that out. Tomorrow, URA comes, and they have to look for money. Otherwise, you're going to close them, up. The other day, I don't know who else comes. And yet, all that money is coming to the same pool, if you like. And so people are burdened. They're thinking, wait a minute. Some of them actually see it as looting, because they're thinking, I'm making little money. This one comes, the other one comes, and that kind of thing. In more specific terms, that harmonization, how far has it gone? Give us some kind of timelines so that people know and have a ray of hope. And then they know, okay, so this is how much uniform tax I need to pay. I plan around that.
Clarification. What favor URA can do for us? When you talk about KCC coming to your door asking for this money, URA coming, I think we need clarity here over the tax heads. It is important so that we don't mix up issues. Which tax heads fall under KCCA or any other local authority, and which tax heads are due to URA, so that we don't seem as if there are double taxations here. It is important. Can you please clarify?
Thank you very much, Honorable Chair and Honorable Members, for those very important and good questions that you have raised. And Honorable Chair, as per your guidance, let me start with the summarized questions that you have given. Number one, Honorable Members, we all agree on the need to widen the tax base, and I've just given you the numbers of growth. However, when we're speaking about the targets, you also remember that I mentioned that, like, for example, this financial year, we've agreed that let's register less, but concentrate on cleaning those that we have registered. So that if there is anybody who has been registered for a tax head not appropriate, or who has been assessed and the assessment is not appropriate, we consider their plea and we adjust accordingly. So the biggest gap we have in this area is the taxpayer sensitization, and we're embarking on that very deliberately, so that the taxpayer gets to know what their responsibilities are, but also what their rights are. As an example, this presumptive tax that we are talking about, not everybody should pay it. the small businesses whose turnover is below 10 million shillings should not pay any tax. So, if our data has brought in a small trader, maybe dealing in chapati or something, but from the third-party data we have assumed that his turnover is above 10 million. His place of appeal, Honorable, is to object to that tax. And the objection can be done online. It can also be done physically by coming to our offices. And you are saying, I do not have this turnover, and I don't think your assessment is fair. Now, URA has 90 days to respond to your objection. In 90 days, we must get back to you saying, no, we have evidence, your turnover is higher, and therefore we think you should pay, or we concede that we are sorry, your turnover seems to be below the threshold, therefore you should not pay. And should we fail to respond in 90 days, then automatically the position of the taxpayer is adopted. They call it election. So if we don't give you an answer in 90 days, you elect automatically and the tax assessment falls null and void. So this is a point of sensitization. Anybody who is not happy with our assessment has a right to appeal. And earlier, another honorable member had asked, people appeal to you and you don't respond. We don't respond at our own peril. 90 days without our response, the law gives the right to the taxpayer to take his position, and therefore the assessment collapses. So, honorable members, on this one, URA is embarking on taxpayer sensitization. We are developing a number of programs. We are increasing our footprint and presence on media channels. We want also to seek the support of our leaders, especially the members of parliament, so that we change the mindset of our taxpayers, but most importantly, we also educate them about their rights. Nobody should pay tax for the monies that you don't make, because income tax is based on your profit. It's based on your income. So if for any reason our data is not accurate, and I'm really saying, yes, we know that our data may not be 100% accurate, but it's indicative. That's why it gives us where to go. But we will continue to refine our data, and we will continue to listen more so that we can take into consideration the appeals from our taxpayers. And we seek your support as honorable leaders in our nation to reach out, because the people have confidence in you as elected leaders. They can listen to you. So once we have sensitized, and on this honorable chair, we are making an application to the honorable Speaker of Parliament. We want a day with all the members of Parliament, or even two, just to discuss tax matters, so that they understand the hardships of these tax challenges. We also hear from them the challenges of the people they represent, so that going forward in this new financial year, where we expected to raise 30 trillion, we really work together without causing pain, unnecessary pain to the taxpayers. So, Honorable Chair, that is on the first question.
Chair, just information on that one. These have accountants, like the big professional business persons. When they come to report to URA offices, what I hear from society and from community is that unless you have money, you can't be heard. Especially those offices where you are saying they run to. And that's why I was very specific, where should they run to? Those with accountants sometimes are assisted. But those without accountants, they are left helpless. And remember, this extension program has been targeting most of these business communities without accountants and personal auditors. What is their fate? Because there's an allegation that those with the money are assisted, even securing TIN numbers, you know it. People are making legitimate claims that to get a TIN number without money, you can't be assisted, and it has become a crisis. Now, where would this poor person who was registered as a chapati seller, overtaxed, where should
do
he
they
run?
go? Okay,
and
so
without an accountant.
The point that Honorable Chair and Honorable Mwanda, my apologies. I think you must have come in at a point when I had mentioned this, but for emphasis, let me repeat it. First of all, whatever business you're doing, you know your turnover. So when our people come to register you, they will ask you questions like, how much money do you make in a year? Oh, in a day, you will mention maybe 20,000. How much in a month? And they use those questions they're asking you, how much are you paying for your rent, to estimate your turnover. But as I've said, If you are below 10 million, pay nothing. If you are between 10 and 30, pay 80,000. If you are between 30 and 50, pay 200,000. If you're between 50 and 100, pay 900,000. That is the highest. Now, you don't need an accountant. These are estimates based on the information you give us. But should we still give you an assessment that you are not happy with, object. For objection, you don't have to see anybody. Go online, object. If you don't use a computer, walk to any of our offices and object. Give them your objection in writing, and you say, I do not agree with this assessment. We don't respond to you in 90 days, that assessment collapses, and nobody will hold you accountable. If we respond to you, we'll have our evidence, and you'll also have received our position, either vacating the assessment or sustaining it because of the evidence that we have. Now, Honorable Member, just in addition, the tin, yes, some years ago was one of the areas of corruption. Some people would demand, and sometimes it would not have to be URA officials, it would be those tax agents, brokers between our offices, they hang around there trying to provide a service. We have demystified and taken away their relevance. Now, tin, you can apply for it on your mobile phone, and you receive it instantly. So where will the person to ask for a bribe come from? Just enter your name, enter your national ID, and you will receive your address, then you receive your tin instantly. So now tin is no longer an area of corruption, and if Honorable Manda, you had heard about that, that must be a thing in the past. Now, number two, problematic assessments. Honorable Chair, I think I've touched that a bit. Where our data is not accurate and where we have assessed taxpayers unfairly, the redress is objection. And objection, we are most obliged to address your objection within that period of time. 90 days, nothing more. Now, harmonization of effort, where are we at with the different entities of government? And to combine this with the comment by the Honorable Chair of the Finance Committee, Honorable Amos, what tax heads are we collecting jointly? An example is on the property and rental tax. Local governments collect property tax. This is for every property that you have in their jurisdiction. Whether you stay in that property or you rent it out, there is an annual property tax. URA collects rental income tax. Rental income tax is charged on a property which you don't stay in, which you rent out, and you're earning an income. So such two tax heads are related, and with the facilitation of technology, we can collect them as one government. But it takes technology at the back end, and the Commissioner IT can mention where we are with the effort to integrate. But also remember that you integrate systems that are in existence. So KCCA may have an automated system of assessing property tax, but definitely another district up-country may not even have a computer to enter this data. So there is a program of government that is running to try and automate these processes at the local governments. And we are also working on interfacing those that have with our own system. Once the technology has linked in, has tied up, then we can approach a taxpayer as one on related taxes. And my colleague could add more light on that. So, Honorable Chair, those are the responses I can give, but I invite my colleagues to enhance these responses. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Honorable Chair and honorable members. I would like to first of all thank Honorable Jessica for raising the issue about the role of the URA in policy making, because indeed that is a very valid concern, but it is also our duty. Under the URA Act, one of our duties really is to advise the Minister of Finance on our policy issues. It is an area that is developing. It is an area that I think we have tried to advise government. And I wanted to just give you two scenarios which also relate to the waivers. During COVID, we realized that the issue of penalties, if you've interacted with a number of our taxpayers, penalties and interest indeed can form a very big sum of the tax that is assessable. And we used to get a lot of complaints and say, but how can you have even assessments that have a figure of interest and penalties that are even more than the principal. And cognizant of the effects of COVID, we then made a proposal to the Minister of Finance, and indeed through the discussions, and it was presented to Parliament in 2020. Section 40C was then enacted in our Tax Procedures Code, where it provided that any tax that is outstanding as at 30th June 2020, all the penalties and the interest were waived off. So that is the one bit, and this was general really to everybody, but it was cognizant of the fact that taxpayers were struggling, and the government needed to come in to relieve them of some of the burden. That was done. But also recently, because even after that waiver, again, we noted within the information that we have that taxpayers still were struggling with the issue of penalties and interest. We were still battling with that. This is a proposal that, again, we took to the Minister of Finance during the last budget engagement. And here I would like to thank you, Honorable Chair and members, indeed, really, because you supported that proposal. So we have now a new section, 40D, and courtesy of you, that the taxpayers, once they pay the principal now, they are by 30th, at the end of this financial year, all their penalties and interest will be waived. So these are some of the remedies coming in from the policy angle, which government is introducing, and of course Parliament has supported these in terms of making sure that the people indeed are not overburdened by some of these measures. But also again to thank you, Chair and honourable members. Really, Parliament also overwhelmingly supported a number of provisions that were brought in the tax bills, and here again, these were concluded within this financial year. So that is the first bit of the waivers that
colleagues,
we have.
there is too much murmuring. We want to capture what she's saying then at some point.
The 40D.
Why we're murmuring
Yes.
is on what is on the
All the
procedures.
tax procedures
because
code.
the minister said 31st December.
Yes,
this year.
31st of
But then
December,
she was saying June. So we wanted that to clarify. But of course,
All the clarity,
but
yes.
of course, Chair, it again comes to us. The problem was as we were amending the procedures, should have insisted that should have been June, but we let it pass as December. Maybe that's where the problem was.
Yes, but it is the penalties that are outstanding as at 30th June, they shall be waived where the taxpayer pays the principal. So these are two things now. The tax and the penalties that is there that was outstanding, and then if by 31st of December 2023 you pay the principal, then that will be waived. And these waivers, because they are in the law, they are applicable to all the taxpayers. So here you don't even, whether you're rich or poor, really, there's no discrimination. Everybody will be entitled to these waivers. We only need you to pay the principal amount, and then that interest category of the waivers within still the Tax Procedures Code, and this is Section 40, where upon the recommendation of the Commissioner General, we can make a case to the Minister of Finance to consider a waiver. But however, there are grounds in the law, so the Commissioner General does not just wake up and make a recommendation. URA must be satisfied that there is difficulty or there is hardship, or that this taxpayer really indeed, the cost of recovery will be excessive on the part of government. So we must make a case, we must study the business of the taxpayer, we must look at the efforts and demonstrate to the Minister of Finance that we as the URA, indeed, we believe that this is a case of a taxpayer who needs a consideration in terms of the waiver. So that again, URA can only make a recommendation, and then it goes to the Minister, who then waives.
These tax holidays, as well, Honourable Chair and members, are covered within the law. If you look at, for instance, there are a number of strategic sectors that have been put in the law, that if you make an investment within those areas, mainly some IT investments, then the investor is entitled to a tax holiday over 10 years from VAT, from income tax and excise duty years. There are conditions that must be met. There has to be a minimum capital investment, and amounts are included within the law. But also, most importantly, you must demonstrate that you are going to use local, because here government is promoting really the use of raw materials. So if you're not able to utilize the resources which are within, then you will not qualify.
I think to answer Honorable Abdallah's question, we are aware of these tax holidays and the conditions, and how they do materialize, how they are going to create so many jobs, how much dollars they are bringing. When it is raising that after calculating 10 years, he closes business and disappears. What steps do you take? Secondly, some have got to the extent, let me give you an example. The game which is there now is different faces. They will change the name, but maintain the same business and are fresh for the tax audit, because this is a different entity. Have you followed that on those?